Hola queridos amigos de Lemas, es un gusto estar con ustedes en una emisión más, ahora con una entrevista extraordinaria que hemos preparado para ustedes desde hace tiempo, con muchísimo gusto, porque tenemos ahora en pantalla a una autora que ha dado a leer a muchos lectores en el mundo, una autora que ha sorprendido con sus textos de fantasía, tanto para jóvenes como para no tan jóvenes, y que hoy tenemos el placer de conversar con ella acerca de uno de sus libros más recientes, Ortiga y Hueso, un libro que fue publicado en 2022 y tan pronto como el año siguiente ya estaba recibiendo un premio Hugo, de los más destacados al ámbito de la fantasía. Está con nosotros T. Kingfisher, también conocida como Ursula Vernon. It's great to have you here. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Oh, happy to do it. I'm delighted to be interviewed. I'm so looking forward to coming to Guadalajara and for the first time and getting to see it.
Well, we're absolutely sure you will love it. The biggest book fair for Spanish readers, one of the biggest, the second biggest one in all the world. So we're really looking forward to have you here, to speak with you, to have you with your readers. And I know you get this question a lot in almost every interview, but since it's something that every reader usually wonders, I would like to ask at the beginning, why don't you help us solve the mystery about your name and your pen name? Because you have signed some works as T. Kingfisher and others with Ursula Vernon. So why the choice, and who are you today?
I can be either one today, actually.
Right.
Ursula Vernon is the name on my birth certificate. That's who I am most of the time. But when I started writing books, I was writing children's books, and they were mostly being published, or they were all being published actually as by Ursula Vernon. And that was great. But there came a point where when you write children's books, there are a lot of things you can't put in the books, and your editors will tell you, like, no, you can't solve this plot by having them burn down the house. Well, arson is not allowed in children's books. And I'm like, but sometimes it's very sensible that
Yeah.
the smart thing to do when you have a haunted house is just to burn the house to the ground. This is the
Yeah.
best, this is the most intelligent thing to do. Uh, so eventually there came a point where I was like, I am going to write a book and it's going to be for adults, and I'm going to put everything in it that they wouldn't let me put in a children's book.
Yes.
The problem is when you do that, you don't want kids picking the book up because they, uh, not necessarily because they'd be horrified. Quite frankly, I think a lot of kids love reading books like that,
Of
but
course.
certainly I did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But because a lot of times they're a lot longer and they'll get bored early on or something, you don't want that. So and also you don't want their parents writing you letters to complain about the terrible things that their children have been reading about burning haunted houses down. So I decided I had to use a pen name to write for adults so that the two didn't get confused. And I picked T. Kingfisher because kingfishers were my favorite bird, and I wanted something that would be a little silly and kind of unique. And I genuinely did not expect to sell very many books as T. Kingfisher. I was writing very weird, small things, and I was very wrong, obviously. And so now I am T. Kingfisher a lot of the time. Usually you can tell when I'm being T. Kingfisher because I'm wearing the hat, but not always because my hair is erect now. So I wear the hat a lot.
Okay, okay. Marvelous. And even though it's one of the questions I had for afterwards, I would like to put it here right now. Um, do you think you changed your way of feeling, thinking, and even writing when you decide to write for young readers or for not that young readers?
Uh, the odd thing was how little I think I changed. I never had a very good idea of whether something was for kids or not when I was writing it, and there were a few times that I would hand in what I thought was I was like, here's a great idea I had for a children's book, and my editor would be like, "Oh, you thought this was a children's book? Wow, no." Uh, I really seem to only have one sort of voice. It's just a matter of what sort of things I put in, and whether there's swearing and things like that. Because I read a lot of horror, and
Mm.
horror is in many ways a lot like writing for children, because both have to be very immediate and present and very you can't be like slow and dreary. You have to get people involved, and they have to be very intense sort of right off the bat, and it's very strongly about how you feel about things. So yeah, it was less different than it probably should have been.
Okay. Okay. And now that you talk about it, I'm thinking absolutely about great authors for young readers, and basically Roald Dahl, who made everything with his short stories for kids, right? And we see really evil kids, really bad things happening to them, and sometimes that's the greatest thing about Roald Dahl, right? What would you
Oh
say
yeah,
about?
yeah. Definitely the like some of his stuff was very scary if you're a kid, and that was great. That was why we read it. And if you've read he wrote some things for adults that are all like murder mysteries about where the murder weapon is beating someone to death with a frozen ham hock and then feeding it to the police when they show up. Like, he wrote very dark things for
So
adults, and then the kids books that so many of us love. It's people are complicated.
that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
So, well, now that we have talked about a little bit about you, yourself, your pen name, and your way of writing for both publics, I would like to make a couple of questions related to Nettle and Bone, one of your most recent books that also got a Hugo Award. Congratulations about it. Another Hugo Award, we have to say.
Thank you.
Um, and well, I found this story amazing, but I always think that the author is the best person always to tell us about his book. So, would you tell us like the main plot about this book, Nettle and Bone?
Sure. This is a book about a woman who is she's a princess. She is the youngest of three, and she's very sheltered. And her sisters have gone off and married a prince. So the oldest one, and she dies, and then the next one, the middle one, marries the same prince, and she lives. But the heroine realizes after a point that the prince is a very bad guy, and he is very unkind, and he is uh, very abusive, and she thinks, my God, someone has to save my sister, and no one is. So I guess it has to be me. And so it's a story about her getting the tools and finding the people who will help her save her sister from this terrible marriage. And a lot, but it's fantasy. So, some of those people are there's a witch who communicates with the dead, and a fairy godmother who is not very good at what she does but tries very hard, and a dog made out of bones. And it's a parts of it are very fun fantasy, and parts of it are very dark. And but it was a lot of fun to write. I got to put a lot of things into it, and write scenes where I just pulled all kinds of weird things out of my imagination. It was like, all right, this would be great. Let me put this in here. There's a chicken that is a possessed chicken that comes with them. It's fun and weird.
It is. I believe it has, as you said, a fancy but horror, but also this quest. And I would say, yes, it's fantasy, but you're treating a very real situation, which is this conflict and domination from men to women, right? We see these three female characters, the three sisters, and even the queen, their mother, that have no tools at all to go against the prince. And so I would like to ask you about how do you see this confrontation inside the novel? Do you believe it to be a reflection of what we're still in this present living today?
Unfortunately, it is. It. I wish it wasn't a reflection of things that happen today. I mean, there are still many people trapped in situations like that where uh, they are their spouses have a more have power over them and abuse it, and there's nothing they can do, and no one to come save them. So, to a certain extent, part of the fantasy is that you can just assemble a crew and go and save people easily. But I think fantasy and well, horror certainly often reflects the problems of the world today, and fantasy is sometimes the same way. It can deal with things that are very grim and from the real world, and turn it around in a funhouse mirror and make it something that we can cope with at a remove, and maybe feel stronger and able to deal with it in the real world when we encounter it.
Yeah, totally. And going back also to your first answer about this book, you were mentioning one of the characters, which is the dog. A dog made out of bones, out of bones from dead dogs, right?
Yep.
And that's chapter one. That's the way the story starts with our main character um, knitting this new dog out of bones. And I think all readers will think immediately about Frankenstein, but that's Mary Shelley 200 years ago doing it with a human corpse, and now you're doing it with a dog, and it looks like just a whole different thing. So how did this scene came to your mind? I believe it's amazing.
I honestly, I'm not sure. It just I had written a short story like years earlier, a very short one that was like 1,000 words that had just come to me, where that included a line about a dog made out of bones. I don't
Wow.
know where that came from. It was just like, I think it just sounded interesting, and then some of my readers were like, "We want to know more about this dog," and I'm like, "Yeah, I kind of do too." And at the time, I was making jewelry, or some with wire and wrapping, and it was interesting. And so I was translating the experience of using wires to connect things to bones, and I was and building this dog. And I've always been sort of fascinated with things, sort of like Mary Shelley, the made things, creatures that are made out of parts that you assemble and they come to life. And uh, this one seemed like a very nice version, because dogs for the most part are very nice, loving animals who are happy and want to be around people. And so she used wire and bones and made this dog who was very nice and wanted to be around people. And it was just a lot of fun to write.
Mhm. And now that you speak about dogs, there's a line I love in the novel that says that not every person in this world deserves the love and affection of a dog. I found it
Yeah.
amazing. I say, well, dogs are so gentle, so noble. What do you think about it? What's your relationship with these animals?
Oh, I've had dogs for years. I have one now who, if the mailman shows up, will begin barking, I'm sure. But yeah, I've had the figures. They're good. They're even when they're not perfect and they have accidents on the floor, or they try to chase chickens or something, they're just very pure, sort of straightforward, and lovable animals. And I mean, how many relationships do we have in life that are as uncomplicated as the one with a dog? So,
Totally.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Mind you, I also have cats, and the cats, that's a much more complicated relationship.
I can guess. And going back to our main character, Mara, something I find fascinated about her is she's a princess, but she's also inside a monastery. She prays and she knows the protocols in nobility. So she's with one foot in each of these two worlds. And there's sometimes that she even prefers to live as the poor person inside the monastery than the princess. What can you tell us about that?
Well, historically, there was a lot of precedent, lots of nobility women in when they were widowed or when they just there wasn't anyone convenient to marry them to would go to a convent and become a nun in European history, and so there was a certain amount of that. She's basically sent off to the convent to keep her out of trouble until they need to marry her off, or so that she doesn't become a threat to the uh, politics of the region by marrying someone and inconveniently. And honestly, I was thinking a lot that being a princess when you're not from a terribly rich country and you are not sleeping on gold beds and whatnot is, I'm sure it's exhausting even when you're very rich. It's that you have no privacy and you are expected to be all of these things for all of these people. And I imagine that it was probably a lot easier in some ways emotionally to be a nun and just to be expected to only be in this place and not what you say is not important. And, the fates of empires do not hang on whether you use the right fork at dinner. Uh, so honestly, given the choice, I'd probably rather be a nun. Being a princess seems really exhausting.
Well, I gotta say that in Mexico, one of the most important writers we have, Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, was a nun, and today we really appreciate her work. So you can maybe still be a nun and a writer.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's probably harder to be a princess than a writer.
Yeah,
But
totally.
yes, I have enormous respect for nuns. The first school I went to in first grade, long, long ago, was run by nuns, and I came out fine. And they weren't the kind with rulers, so it's all good.
Perfect, perfect. And also, this value I can feel when you speak about the main characters, especially Mara and her sisters, which is the love between siblings and the confidence, and that there's a moment in which Mara, being the youngest one, she feels because she has actually heard her sister say, "I hate you." She grows up thinking she's not loved by her, but despite everything, she is right next to her sister, and she's the one who will want to rescue her. So, what can you tell us about this relationship between siblings?
Uh, Probably not as much as some other people. I was an only child for until I was about 25, and then there was a bit of an accident with an herbal supplement, and now I have a brother who's about 25 years younger than I am. But
Yeah.
I have known like I said, people are complicated, but I have known many sibling relationships before, and my first husband and his sister were never estranged, but at one point they had this sort of fractious sibling relationship where they say things that perhaps they did not mean, and then years later uh, came back and they're like, "Well, I thought you hated me." What? No, well, you said so. I was 12, kind of thing, and that definitely stuck with me. And I have two stepsons who are brothers, and watching their relationship and the way that they have grown up, and I mean, they're boys. They squabble about many things, but they will come to each other's defense immediately. The sort of uh, my brother is my worst enemy until anyone says anything bad about them, and then I will turn on them. So
Totally, totally. No, it's really, really nice to see the relationship among them. And I feel this is one of those novels in which anything that I could say would be a great spoiler for everyone. So I just want to make one last question. and not saying that much about the story, but there's a moment in which Mara gets with big surprise to a dwarf market. But people don't pay with coins, with bills, or everything like anything like that. They pay with time, with the time of their life. I find that idea amazing, and I would like to ask you, would you be willing to give time of your life, Ursula, for something, for whichever you could pick?
There are like a few things that I would gladly, pay time off, but they would all be big things like, cures for cancer and stuff. I'd be like, yeah, I'll drop a few years
Do
on
it.
that. Does anyone else want to go in? We can
Mm.
pool some decades. And for small things for me, or well, small things for me. At the moment, no, I not really. I have so many things. I am so lucky. I get to do the job that I love. I'm married to a wonderful man. I have a dog who loves me, things like that. I get to, people ask me to come to Guadalajara and talk to readers, which I think is fantastic. There's not really anything much that I want for me that I would necessarily want to spend time on. There have been points in my life where I would certainly have been like, if I could move past this, or if I could meet the love of my life or something, I would happily have laid out time. But at the moment I'm pretty good.
All right,
Ask me
all
again in a few years. You never know.
okay, perfect. I will, I will. And now, now that we've talked about this novel in particular, I would like to ask you about your process in writing, but not also in writing. I have seen some of your interviews in which you speak not only about the moment in which you drag the pen or you type in the computer, but also, and this is something that some authors just don't speak about it, and readers sometimes don't imagine it, the process of editing. How do you get along with it?
Well, the editing is very much a process. I usually, having typed out and sent off the manuscript, I will eventually get an email back from my editor say, and there will be the big email that says, okay, this is good, but we need to do this and this and this and this. And you read that, and my process is to go, this is all completely wrong. None of this is, absolutely not. And then I go and stomp off and play video games for the rest of the afternoon. And then the next day, I'm like, okay, I suppose I could make one or two changes if it will make them happy. And by the third day, I'm like, oh God, they're right. I guess I do have to change all of these things. There's a sort of, I have to work through the stages of grief there. But and then it's fine. I go in, I make the edits, and depending on the book, sometimes it's very straightforward. Sometimes it's like, okay, you only need to do a couple of things to set up this other scene, or I don't think we hear enough about this, or we could combine these two scenes that are dragging. Sometimes it's a bigger sort of rewrite, and I will work on it until I no longer know if I have done everything I am supposed to do. I can't keep the book all in my head anymore, and I'm just sending it to the editor and going, I really hope they know what they're doing, because it's been 2 weeks and I don't know what I'm doing now.
I see, I see. Because it's the least exciting part about writing, right? Is you
For me, yeah. Well, the least exciting part is the final stage of the copy edits, when you have to go through and fix typos and things. I find it, but I know people who love editing, and I look at them like, are you an alien? But have you come from another planet? But that's the part of the process they enjoy the most. And every writer is different. Most of them that I know are like, oh God, the editing, no.
yeah.
uh, for the most part, it's what you got to do, because the editor is very good. They are the person who keeps you from embarrassing yourself in front of the readers, and you really really want to have them.
I love that definition because readers usually buy the story of the conflict between the editor and the writer, and the editor never letting the author do what he wants or she wants. And now that you put in those words, it's so true, right? Like saying, okay, this is good, but it can be better, or this
Yep.
isn't that good as you were expecting, right? And I would like
Yep.
to ask you, do you ever, Ursula, send your manuscripts to other readers before sending to the editor?
Well, usually there is a point at right at about when I'm two-thirds of the way through the book, and it is always at about the two-thirds mark when I realize that I have no idea what I'm doing. This is the worst book ever written. My editor is going to think that, I fell on my head or something. And then I go to my husband and I'm like, I need you to read this book right now and
Yeah.
tell me if it shames my ancestors. And he is very patient about that. I'm very lucky and will read it, but he does have to go into another room because if he's reading it and he laughs, I'm immediately like, what part was that? What line made you laugh? What bit was that? Where are you? So yeah, he now is like, I'm just gonna go in the other room and read.
Okay.
And he
Or
will come
like,
back and usually he's like, it's fine. It keep writing. It's good. It doesn't shame your ancestors. Every now and again he'll be like, I don't understand, this bit, or this character is not coming off well. And but for the most part, it's fine. And if it's horror, yes, it's scary. Yes, that part was very traumatic. And then I'm like, okay, good. This is, and then I can finish it and send it to the editor. But I occasionally there's another friend or two of mine that I will send it to and be like, please tell me to keep going on this. But usually my husband is the first one who reads it and is uh, the problem is that since usually it's not finished at that point, and it takes so long for books to get published, occasionally it will be a year or two before he knows how the book ends. And because I will end it with just like a paragraph that says, "And it all works out, and they live happily ever after," or whatever. And he's like, I needed to know that bit." Uh, he's very patient about it.
and it's so lucky to have someone who can make that kind of comments. Really, really lucky.
Oh yes,
And
I. That is part of the reason I would not need to spend time in the market.
perfect. And I also find it interesting because sometimes I mean I think it happens with books, but it also happens with movies that when the reader or the spectator goes and sees the whole picture, okay, 1, 2 hours, a couple of hours, right? But it's hard to see what the author went through to write the book, to make the movie, to anything, right? And when we have interviews with authors, sometimes even if it's not what happens to them, they would say, "Oh no, I was always sure about this book. I had it all straightforward." And listen to someone who says, "Sometimes I just don't know what I'm doing." It's I think like really human for us like readers around you.
I honestly, I usually start out with just the vaguest idea of what I'm doing and start writing and see what happens. There are people who plot their books very intensively and they know exactly what's going to happen where, and I'm just sort of, just charge off in a direction and see where it goes. So sometimes I take detours I didn't expect, or the book turns out to be about things I had no idea it was about. But I enjoy getting there that way.
Marvelous, marvelous. And Ursula, I would also like to ask you, you have received a whole bunch of prizes and nominations. Um, does that add pressure to your work, or is it just something you don't think about it when you're writing?
Uh, I don't usually think about it when I'm writing. What I think about usually is the editor that I'm going to hand it to and the deadline, and the pressure is really I have to have this done by December or whatever. Not is this going to win an award? Once it's published and out there, and because there's such a long lead time on publishing, so a book I write now won't be published usually until for another year or two. And and the award season is so far off in the future that I generally don't worry about it too much. But uh, once that time rolls around and the nominations come out, then I start thinking that was a pretty good book, but it's not something I usually think about while writing. It's just so far off in the future.
And when you started writing, did you ever think, I mean, maybe you dreamt about it, but did you ever really think I will be in one of those theaters receiving one of those prizes?
Uh, when I was like 12 and was like, I'm going to write books, I think I might have thought, actually, because I was 12 and what did I know about how hard any of this was? I was like, yes, of course I will be a very successful writer. And then you're an adult and you realize that, oh, there's no chance of that. And then and then suddenly, you wind up by a completely confusing route. You get back there and you're like, oh, this happened. Huh, I did not see that coming. It's kind of funny. It's If you had told 12-year-old me would have been like, yeah, that sounds about right. If you'd told 20-year-old me would be like, what? No, no way. So there are lots of things that are much easier when we don't know they're impossible.
Hmm. Totally, totally. And there's also the Ursula who paints, who illustrates. How does this other personality get along with the other one?
Uh, Sometimes they're in conflict. When I was doing children's books, when I was doing most of the illustrating, I would always write them first. And so if I wanted to write this scene takes place in a cathedral and they're arguing and there's 50 people there, I could just write that, and then then artist me would show up and have to draw it and would be like, writer brain, I'm going to know, what are you doing? I have to actually draw all of this. So the two did not always get along. It's very easy as a writer. If I want the characters to be in a cathedral, I just type they were in a cathedral, and artist's brain has to get out the rulers and the vanishing points and everything. So in many ways, it is easier to be a writer. It's certainly a lot faster than it is to be an illustrator. I have not been illustrating too many children's books these last few years because the pandemic uh, sort of slowed children's publishing a lot because kids find books at school or to their librarians and their teachers, and not being there, there was a real, the brakes got put on a lot of kids' books then. So, but then adults bought a lot more books, so it works out, I guess.
Yeah, I can guess. And now that we think, speaking about young Ursula starting to write and dreaming about these nominations, these prizes, this fame, let's say, what would you say someone who's also in that process of wanting to become a writer?
Uh, my first instinctive thought is save yourself. Oh God. But no, it's absolutely wonderful if you can get there. It's just I had there were lots of years where I had jobs that were not being a writer, and I was having to write in the evenings and whatnot, and it's much easier if you are in a country with socialized medicine, I imagine, and there's it's very difficult. It's wonderful. It's fantastic, and there are you should absolutely write, even if you don't do it for money. Write fan fiction. Write if it makes you happy. Write anything that brings you joy, and the world will be better for that. But
Mm,
if you want to be a professional writer, then you know you just keep writing, and I mean, it can't be that hard. They let us do it.
mm. Totally, totally. Two words, keep writing. Marvelous. There's one last question I would like to ask you, a question that we like to do here in this channel for Le Mas de Librerías Gandhi, which is the following. What are you reading right now?
Oh, right at this moment, I am. They send me books to blurb, to read in advance usually, and so I have a the Emily Tesch's The Incandescent is. I'm not sure when that will be coming out, but that's what I've been reading. It's a lot of fun. It's just a fascinating book, and it's sort of about there are all the stories about the magical school for witches and wizards. This is the story from the other side. This is the faculty of that school who is having to, the adults who are trying to keep the kids from blowing themselves up or ending the world, and are also having to dealing with funding and things like that. And it's very charming. I'm enjoying it a lot.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I have no further questions, Your Honor. Would you like to add anything before we close?
Just that I'm really looking forward to coming and meeting all of these readers that I've never been able to meet before, and to seeing Mexico. Have always wanted to visit, and I'm so thrilled that now I get to.
Hmm. We will be very happy to have you there. I'm sure you will love the country, love the International Book Fair, and that it will be an amazing country for you and your readers. Thanks a lot, Ursula, for this interview.
Thank you for having me.
Y gracias a todos ustedes, seguidores de Lemas, de Librerías Gandhi, por estar en esta entrevista. Esperemos que hayan disfrutado muchísimo, muchísimo estas palabras, no solo acerca de la propia Kingfisher, sino también acerca de sus libros, de su proceso de escritura y todos los detalles que nos ha dado por ahora. Gracias por seguir esta transmisión. Yo soy Lictor Conis y en nombre de todo Lemas me despido de ustedes. Hasta la próxima.